I'm Robin Miller Brecker.
And I'm Karen Lenzer. Welcome to Seeking Center, the podcast.
Join us each week as we have the conversations and weed through the spiritual and holistic clutter for you. We'll boil it down to what you need to know now.
We're all about total wellness, which to us means building a healthy life on a physical, mental, and spiritual level. We'll talk to the trailblazers who will introduce you to the practices, products, and experiences that may be just what you need to hear about to transform your life.
If you're listening to this, it's no accident. Think of this as your seeking center and your place to seek your center. And for even more mega inspo, sign up for Seeking Center, the newsletter at seekingcenter.app. Here's one thing we know for sure. We all live on this planet together. We are all part of Mother Earth. Even though we're spiritual beings, we chose to have this human experience right on this planet. And so how we take care of this larger home that we call Earth matters if we care about ourselves and each other. We've all heard the term sustainable living, and many of us are doing what we can to take better care of the Earth and therefore humanity. However, what does that term really mean, and what more can we be doing? We're thrilled to welcome our friend Rory Rubin, co-founder and CEO of SI Container Builds, a company that builds functional and cost-friendly living and working spaces in recycled shipping containers. Yes, I said shipping containers. We're going to discuss how that even works, as well as the why it's a tremendously attractive alternative to consider in your future. Plus, Rory is giving us all ways we can show more love to Mother Earth and ourselves. There is so much to discuss. Hi, Rory.
Hey, both of you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, we're so glad you're here.
So we're going to start with, how do you define home, Rory?
I moved a lot in my lifetime. And so the definition of home to me is more about feeling and smelling and that emotional piece versus the place that covers your head. And I think everyone can relate to walking into a room or a comfortable chair or couch or laughter and the smells of someone cooking. And the definition of home truly was that safe place to be. And as a parent now, my goal was really to make sure that it was a safe place for her to land wherever we wound up. So that's how I feel about home in general.
I love that. It's true. Since moving to a brand new place, your home takes on a different meaning, especially when you don't know people, maybe in your neighborhood. Now, especially for a lot of us who are working from home. So it's really become our working place, our sleeping place, our family place. Talk about how this idea of sustainable living fits into the home and why that is so important now more than ever.
I think over the last probably 10, 15 years, the word sustainable has become that buzzword that people use. And I think it means something different to everybody, but the premise of the word means to coexist. And there are actually 3 buckets around that. And that's from the environmental piece, which a lot of people will probably gravitate to, the economic piece, to the social piece. And I fell into the sustainability piece because I was looking for a way to support one of the core pieces to what my husband and I do, which is camping. You always have to build your shelter first. And so I wanted to figure out a way that made a lot more sense to more people. And it turned out that the way I was envisioning actually was a very sustainable way. And so that's how those 2 pieces came together to coexist, was a real direct need for the safety into the sustainability piece for me.
And then how did you dig into that sustainability piece? Did you always have an interest in it? And did you have to do research? What ended up happening?
Yeah. So when I decided that I wanted to do the housing piece and tie it into sustainability, I really had to think about what that meant. And our core structure, like you mentioned, is the shipping container. And there are 23 million shipping containers sitting around rusting. And
oh my God. Hold on.
23 million.
23 million?
It's a real problem. And the thing is that now you will both be driving somewhere and you'll happen to notice, oh my gosh, there's 10 shipping containers. They're stacked and there's like 1 billion over here. And it's, what are they using them for? And really what happened is that we are an import driven country. So everything comes overseas and they don't ship these containers back. It is cheaper for them to make a container again than to ship them back. So other countries have been phenomenal about about reusing these containers. And coming from an architectural family and construction family, I'm like, that's it. Now I have a structure. It meets the sustainability piece that I love. It looks at the tiny living, which I'm sure we'll talk about it down the road here. And it really just fits that whole genre of doing something good with something that's going to sit there and rust.
All of a sudden, I'm thinking about driving down these Texas highways in the middle of nowhere and seeing these containers. And they've always made my head do this little turn. What the heck is that doing there? But I have seen people start to create little structures out of them. Can you talk about what was that inspiration moment for you guys? What made you go, this is where we want to spend our time and energy and get creative on how we utilize them?
I laugh because I started off as a clinical social worker in my last life, basically. And then I went into a lot of management consulting. And I woke up at 48 and I looked at my husband and I said, I want to start a business. I'm having a midlife crisis. And he's, oh my gosh, here we go. And really, I looked at our lives and wanting to live smaller at some point. I felt like that home, that first question of how do you define a home and what does it mean? And it doesn't mean stuff to me. It really means an environment that just feels really good. And if I knew that we were going to be empty nesters in, 5 or so years, how can we really make that happen? And then translated that into, I want to do this. Are other people doing this? And you look overseas and people are living in small spaces and they're happy. They're happy. The people, we can live on less and be happy and still have the things we want. And it all just snowballed from that. And I started to do a lot more research around it. And it was just the medium I wanted to use. And in the US, it just wasn't being used as well and as often as it is in other places. So it all fell together.
I know you talked about camping, and then you also mentioned that term, tiny living. What does that mean? I think some people probably have heard of it, and some people may have seen things on HGTV because they've done some phenomenal shows with it. But what does it mean?
I think it means something a little different for everybody. I joke with Dan and I say, I want to convert a van and I want to go live in it and live across country and really just enjoy and seek out the new adventures. And he says, okay, you go do that and I'll meet you in South Dakota for a weekend. Like for him, that became too small. And I think that really is, how can you create a space or an environment that's that just right concept? We have my space for my office that sits in my backyard is 8 by 10 by 9.5 ceiling. That's a great size little office. But then if you have kids, you're not going to be living in an 8 by 10 shipping container. We do get up to the 3-bedroom, 2-bath unit, but we just try to keep it so that it is not wasted space. It's space that we still have an open floor plan and everyone does still have a bedroom and they do have a bathroom. And it's really about utilizing space better. And some people can live really tiny on very little. And then there's people who just want to live a little small than where we all live now.
I'm just looking at Karen's face because we talk about all the time, because what Karen would love to do is actually what you just said before, which was like go live in some sort of RV or van and travel around, right?
Yeah, you want to go, Rory.
I'm with you.
I'm your
Center SI something going on.
You have to really assess what you can do. And when we go off-grid camping, we are truly off-grid. And it was something that friends of ours that really inspired us to start doing. And we love that. But we're like dehydrated food and water and really living off there. And there are people who look at me like, no, glamping's great for me. I want to go live in a place where I have running water. You got to look at it and where you're at. But everyone can make a difference and put it in perspective.
And what I love about what you guys are doing, and we'll have lots of links so everybody can really see how beautiful these structures are. But even for people who maybe not wanting to give up their home, but maybe want, like you said, I keep saying to Robin, I would love that little she shed in my backyard where I could literally go out and have my own meditative space and place to work and then shut the door. I know the people next door to us, they have a whole bunch of little kids that they're homeschooling, and it would be a great place to have outside of the home where they could just consider that their space. Or mom-in-law maybe moving in for a time and you want to give her own space. So I love this idea of all of the ways you could potentially use these structures if you want that little cabin in the woods. But if you want just that little extra space in your yard to call your own, that's another opportunity opportunity for people to utilize your structures too. What do you call them again?
People will either say cargo architecture or shipping containers, repurposed shipping containers. We're very specific on what we use. And really, it's about if you're going to convert something into a dwelling, you want to make sure it's safe before. So we are taking the one trip containers, meaning they traveled across the sea one time, and we are taking those right off of the shipyards. So now we have some control over the manifest. It's bringing in Nike shoes versus hazardous waste. And really that's important because it needs to be recycled anyway. And then we understand the quality of what we're doing. And I love the fact that you can appreciate that it really does repurpose into a lot of different things. And I think the advantage that it has is that you can really blend it into your community. Robin doesn't live that far from me. And if you drive by my backyard, my shipping container office actually looks like my 100-year-old English stucco house. And that was one of the requirements of blending, because if people want to have these extra places, they still want to make it maybe look like a home. The misconception of it that it's a rusty old box, it just doesn't apply. It's not like that at all. And so that's a big education piece for us. And then you can do it as if your parents are older. We don't live, unfortunately, in a society that typically has their parents come and stay with them as a regular thing. Now they can have a sense of independence in the backyard. Our 40-foot has a full bedroom, full bath, full kitchen, full living in the container right in the backyard. And so what a sense of meaning when you can have your adult parent or your adult child that can't afford rent. We're really struggling with people being able to afford living spaces these days. And that's really a big piece for us too.
When you talk about the affordability, what do they start at? What would people, if they start to look into this, how much are you talking?
Sure. Because we follow everything to building code. So we do everything the way it's supposed to be. It's not as cheap as people want to think it is because we're not just taking a container and throwing a desk in. So we are being insulation and framing and floors and all your electric and all of that. So our very small unit will run you about $15,000, and our 3-bedroom, 2-bath unit will probably be about $200,000. And then we call that fully turnkey. So you are being able to go right in there and then decorate and hook it up to your electric and plumbing and be ready to live in it.
I think that sounds amazing. I'm writing this.
Karen's going to be my customer.
I might be your distributor.
I love you even more.
I'm not kidding. I'm really excited about this. So what is the process then? So do people just go to your website and then come up with the idea of how much space, and do they customize it with you, Rory? How does that work?
So we had originally thought that we were going to just do standard layouts, which we do actually have on our website, which are stamped architectural and engineer plans. We're licensed in all 50 states to be your builder. And then what we found out is that people might start that way, but in your head, you'll walk in saying, I need X amount of bedrooms, X amount of bathrooms. And then so we start with that, and then we customize around that. We really do want to try to stay in our footprint because then it comes back to the sustainability. But some people, they like the cool effect of a shipping container. So at least I know that they're doing something by recycling is good too.
And then can you talk about, in terms of if people use solar panels, and what other ways are you helping from a sustainable perspective?
So it's all around that whole passive house concept. And what that is, and that's become a little bit of a buzzword too, is how sustainable can you go? And we look at that into two breaths. One is how sustainable can we make our warehouse? So we're always trying to make that as passive as possible with energy efficiency. And then how can we make somebody's home as energy efficient and in using other materials to make it sustainable? And that sometimes depends on the person, because unfortunately, solar, which is fantastic and offered almost everywhere, is still not cheap. And so people have to make the decision of long term, this is not just helping Mother Earth, but this is just overall what we should be doing. Can I put the money in up front knowing it's going to recoup the benefit? Or do I just say I'm going the traditional route? Solar is the one that people tend to understand the most, but we use things like mini splits, which is making it very energy efficient and Energy Star. We use insulation so that it's not going to be moldy and mildew. There's this lavender-based spray foam that's fantastic to use. There's all kinds of flooring and other types of products that we like, and we love recycling. If you guys can come to our showroom at some point, we reutilize the door of a shipping container for our conference table. We'll try to take the cuts that we use and we'll try to do all kinds of really fun, funky things. So there's a lot of levels, and we encourage people But at the end of the day, you have to meet your clients where they're going to land on some of those pieces.
Are they more durable? Is there some advantage to the actual material of the cargo material?
Yeah. So, you're talking about a Core 10 steel structure. So a 40 by 8 by 9.5 feet roughly is 18,000 pounds. And so that thing's going absolutely nowhere. So when you're coming up against a hurricane, a tornado, the fires in California, it is just a superior structure to what most of us live in, our stick-built homes. And with very little maintenance, it can last over 100 years.
Wow.
So we will paint it with a fresh coat of marine gray paint. And then you can put cladding on it and all of that. But at the end of the day, these things are made to go over back and forth on the ocean dozens and dozens of times. And so the structural integrity really is superior to what we are typically used to living in.
Karen, like I see us having Seeking Center. I can see you using these.
Yes, please. Yeah. You can do your spa and your meditation.
That's right.
All of that. That is just something we've just launched. Those kinds of pieces are really important to me. It really ticks off the box in terms of my social work background and the holistic treatment and how we can use these structures for those pieces. And it's important because you can do it.
Talking about all that you put into this from a soul perspective. And right before we got on, we were talking about what it's like to own your own business because we're on the same journey. In that respect, what would you say you've been relying on as you started this journey?
Women. Really?
Yeah.
I am working in a very male dominant industry. And so finding women who have either paved the way ahead of me or the mentors that I have put into place in my lives have been a huge piece of my world, as well as my husband. Dan works a full-time job separate from this, and he has really been my rock in terms of getting me through those moments where you're thinking, oh my gosh, I just did this and this is hard. And this is a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. And I really just think having people that know you well enough to support you, even when you're not supporting yourself, is probably really what it took for me to get even this far. I would like to leave that as a legacy for especially my daughter, my son too, but to show that a journey can be multiple directions. Robin, I don't know as much about Karen's journey, but I've seen your journey a little bit, and you did not start where you are now. I mean,
no.
you utilized your skills and your knowledge, but I'm sure if someone asked you 20 years ago that this was what you're going to be doing, and you would have thought they were crazy.
I would have actually, yes.
And that's usually the sign that you're on the right path, right? When you're really putting yourself out there and following an inspired dream. And I love what you just said, Rory, about your legacy, because I think there's got to be some of that. Your children, your grandchildren, who knows, will be able to drive down streets and be able to see these structures and know that you had a hand in bringing them there, which is really cool. It's really a legacy of home, of giving people a space. And I think that's one of the biggest gifts. It's something that sometimes we almost take for granted, and yet is such a shaper of our daily lives and an influence on how we feel. And like you said, that shelter of feeling safe, and ideally it reflecting us as well and who we are as people. So it's an incredible gift, not to mention what you're doing for the planet. That's an added bonus, of course. I just think that's such a wonderful legacy for you to leave behind. And congratulations, by the way, on following through on that, because as we were saying, it takes a lot of wherewithal. It takes a lot of belief and persistence and all of those things to really carry out a big dream like this.
I think when you have a little person looking at you and seeing the normal struggles, and Karen, I know with your daughter, you look at their normal struggles and you think, oh my gosh, I know that they're going to be strong enough to get through this. Oh, by the way, I'm a role model. And so I have to show her that my problems might be a little bigger than hers, but I have to figure out how to get through this too. And in a very human way. And she gets to see how it's hard. And that's okay, because it actually is always going to be hard at some level. And she's going to be tough enough to do it. And those moments where she's looking at me and I'm like, oh my gosh, she's Mom, you got this. It's,
That's true.
Maybe I do.
I'm just thinking of things from a home perspective and the future of our planet and for our children and their children. And I can see shipping containers and little villages needing to be what ends up just like you just said, would you have thought you were going to do this 20 years ago? And I would have said no. Did you even know that you could live in a shipping container 20 years ago?
Absolutely not. And people, I think they started off just thinking about it as being a very creative way to live. And then that they realized that it's not just creative, it's actually meaningful. And the sustainability is really important and really there. And it's our commitment. I would say that everyone has the ability to do a little something. If the definition of sustainability is to coexist, then we're needing to coexist with this planet.
Yes.
And you don't have to do this in this big, grandiose way. You don't need to go start a business and recycle absolutely everything and only wear the same shirt and do something little. I think that the Green Building Association, which is a national association that we use to look at how we can make things better, they have checklists and they have blocks of checklists. And basically their concept is pick a few of these, go for it. Maybe every quarter, add a couple more. And this just happened to be the way that we could contribute to that. And then personally, our commitment is little by little. I'm wasteful in my own way, but at least now I'm more mindful of that wasteful, which has been good.
Speaking of that, what would you suggest are little ways that people can start to be and live more sustainably?
That's a great question. I think you really need to have a passion in something. If you're going to look at it from a environmental, economic, or social bucket piece, it's selecting what is most important to me. And if I want to tackle the environment, okay, what does that mean? Maybe I recycle more. Maybe I'm committed to not using one-time plastic, like your water bottles or whatever it is. Those little things. Maybe you start planting a tree. Maybe when you're recycling clothes or when you're buying clothes. I just heard this terrible thing. I had to actually look it up is when we recycle our clothes, like when we give them to charity, the thousands and thousands of pounds of clothes that don't get used and clothes that are in landfill, do I really need that extra sweater that I'm buying in the winter? Maybe I don't. So that or food waste. We're really lucky. We have food on our table and an abundance of. Maybe we don't need so much. So everyone can decide on something that's meaningful to them and really start to put that into place because it makes a difference.
It really does. When you think of each individual, we've had these conversations too about we all make that difference. Even if it's just one or two little things, like you said, it really does add up. Can I just go back and ask one curious question?
Oh my gosh, please.
About these buildings. So because I'm doing this in my head, Rory, I really am.
Okay. So let's build you a village.
Love that, like the light bulbs going on.
That's awesome. That's great.
I'm just trying to picture. So I'm in there and let's just say hypothetically, it's a she shed, little space for me in my backyard. Do I design it all with you and then it comes complete on a truck bed somehow? Yep. Or is it built on my property? Like, how does that part of it work?
Oh, that's a great question. So we had originally started the company where we were building on site and we quickly realized that was a really bad thing to do, especially if it was all over the country, because now we're dealing with weather and zoning and building codes and all of that. So we were able to get funded and we are in a warehouse where we build everything. So what you would do is we would have a conversation on what your needs are. And let's just consider it a she shed and you're doing the same one that I have in my backyard as an office. So you would know the dimensions. And then we would talk through just about the stuff that, how do I get it up to turnkey? And then the cool thing is I would say, hey, Karen, this is what we have. Now pick your wall colors. Now pick your floor. Now build this out in terms of what you think would be really nice for you. And then we finish it. We stick it on a flatbed truck because the trucks are shipping containers for the most part. And we'll send it down to you. And then what happens? It comes right off the truck. We crane it right. Either you have a foundation, depending on what size. We make sure we help coordinate that. You stick it down and you're ready to hook it up and be inside of it. So you do have the ability to do some customization, but you don't need to customize the drywall. The stuff like if you're not a builder, you don't want to worry about that. You want to worry that you have the right color yellow painted on something like that or something that blends into what you're trying to do.
I would work with you and show you a picture of the house so that ideally you could create the outside of it to aesthetically go with that.
Yeah. So we actually have 5 properties that are up in Wisconsin and they are more in a wood-like setting. So the colors or the cladding that they would have chosen would blend into that type of environment. environment. The city of Chicago, we're working on some affordable housing. The architectural kind of place that the city would do. We're not going to do something super industrial. It's going to blend into more of that townhouse feel of the south side of Chicago. And yes, you would find a picture and then we would find a way to blend it. And I think what I did for my office is the front looks like my house, but I kept the container doors on and they're bright red. And the only way you can see that is by walking around, because I like the industrial piece, but the city where I live in didn't want to see the industrial piece. So I blended all of that and hid it away from them.
So cool. And it's then easy to hook up the electricity and the water and all of that.
Yeah, it's hooked up right to my house. So this one doesn't have plumbing in it. We can do it as a design of an RV and hook it up that way. Otherwise, it can hook up to general sewer. People will build a well. People will use composting toilets. Once again, that gets into all of that sustainability. How far do you want to go? There's incinerating toilets. There's water retention where all the water is collected, obviously, and you can use it for watering your plants and gray water and stuff like that. Very easy. We have the ability to kind of take it through the spectrum. You want to be completely off grid? We've got that package. You want to blend into the suburban life around you? Then we can blend it into where you are there.
Can you talk about too how you're using these in a more creative way for good?
We were blessed to partner with Taraji Henson's foundation, the actress Boris L. Henson Foundation, and the Kate Spade Foundation to put wellness, we're calling them she pods, wellness pods on university campuses, really aligning with the fact that the mental health area among women of color is lacking. There's still a lot of taboo around that. So this was a supportive measure to help encourage young Black women on college campuses to enjoy ways to explore other alternatives to help with mental health, yoga, meditation, therapy, outdoor space. It's a pilot. So we put the first one down at Alabama State University. They were in our warehouse. They're just spectacular. And you'll have to go onto the website to do that. And Taraji was on the Today Show and The View, all that kind of stuff. It's nice that she has the star power, but it was a very personal project for her and her foundation. And Tracy Jenkins is the one who runs her foundation. And obviously we all know what happened with Kate Spade. And so around suicide prevention. So these units there was a student artist that did the wrap around one of these.
They are so gorgeous. Everyone will need to go check them out on the site because it was actually so inspiring on all of these different levels, knowing how they were going to be used and then actually seeing them really breathtaking.
They're breathtaking. The design team did a fantastic job on when designers come in and they say they're going to paint it this color or use this, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, that is not going to work. And of course, they know what they're doing and they pull this all together and you're like, I wish I had this on my campus.
Yeah. When I saw them, I'm like, oh God, look what we can do.
And so talk about a legacy. Now, these young women on this campus, and there'll be more coming. The goal is to do the she pods and then do the he pods because men struggle with just as much mental health, and then do the non-binary pods as well so that everybody can, it's really cool. I'm so proud because of the end result. And obviously I know that we're the builders, but this team of people that I work with just gave out so much joy and so much energy and collab that it was priceless. And they're all women. Yes, the person who runs the show on our floor is a man and he's fantastic. But these women all came together to make this project work.
I just think about the use of all of the different places, right? In almost any stage of life, the customization, like you were saying before, of really giving people that opportunity to create a space that reflects them and what they need in that space.
You'll love the concept that we have created. We haven't implemented yet, but it's called a workplace live environment. So the containers actually, you develop a site plan with a village where you have your living, your homes, whether it be townhomes or small homes or row houses. And then you have your work where it's the people who are in the coffee shops and the people who are running those retail spaces. And then you have the play pieces, which are these meditation places. So it's a whole workplace village all out of containers. And so you can really mix and match what you're trying to do. And you really just never have to leave your little village. It's a very community feel then in one place.
Has anyone done anything like that yet?
We have two that are being proposed right now, not far from here. So we're keeping our fingers crossed that this will come into fruition and we'll be able to do it.
Oh my goodness.
Feels just to your point, like they are more affordable.
It's obtainable. It's something that I hope that we can really explore everywhere for more and more people and to help provide people who can't afford anything. We are not able to target the homeless at this point because we're going to need to probably have the support of grant money and other types of nonprofit funding. But we are able to support families that are working and still can't buy a house. Those kinds of people that really are busting their rear ends off and still can't make their ends meet. And that should not happen. You should be able to put a roof over your house of what we would want to live into. I'm not going to build you something that I would not want to live in myself.
No, it gives that dream of having a home and making it a reality. They don't have to have a large plot of land. It doesn't have to be monumental. And yet, even what you were saying before about the cost efficiencies of some of the ways that you can build that will also help them save on the back end as well. It's so much more than just reinventing a shipping container, Rory. It really is. And
you asked the question, Robin, early on about tiny living and tiny home. If you think about our own home and how much wasted space we actually have, hallways and little nooks and things like that we decorate, but we really don't need. And so people are like, oh, I don't want to be on top of each other. You're really not. You get used to how you feel and it's not uncomfortable. I'm not talking about a box. And I think people realize they just need a lot less and then they utilize the spaces just much more efficiently.
I think a lot of people now are looking at that simplification, and this just gives them an inspiring way to do it, because then they can not only have this beautiful space, but it can be a space that does good for the earth.
And if you're not even into sustainability, now is a way for you to do it just by accident.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Tell us what you feel like is the impact that you want to leave on this planet.
I think for me, it's probably a couple of fold. The legacy for my kids to see that you can do what you want to do if you just put some grit into it and the persistence around that. And that the impact doesn't have to be big. It can be smaller. But really coming from that family that has the architects and the construction people, I'm leaving something that people can visually see that is maybe a smaller footprint, but still beautiful. And that kind of warms my heart because now you can use it and really impact a lot of people in a lot of different types of ways. So the legacy piece is really important to me long term.
And what advice would you give to someone who might have a dream like this, who might want to launch their own idea, business? What has it been for you? I know it is challenging, but what kind of advice would you give to that person?
I think my biggest takeaway from my experience as an entrepreneur, and I just had a friend whose daughter's in college interview me around entrepreneurialism. And I think that there are two kinds of entrepreneurs. I thought about this for a long time. I think it's the entrepreneur that has big ideas and really they have wonderful ways of impacting other people in other ways to utilize ideas and integrate creativity. And they're needed in one way. And then there are the entrepreneurs who are crazy to start a business, me, who might have a good idea and then really has to put in all of that work and persistence. And I don't believe you need to be an entrepreneur in both ways. I think you can find a way to be an entrepreneur in either way. And really, it's about if you're going to do something, you should go for it, but you should do it with a knowledge of what it means, which for me is talking to everybody you know, and then everybody they know, and really helping to flush all that out, because you might find out that you start in point A, and it doesn't mean point A is not wonderful, but point A, you might not have enough information to get to point C. And if your goal is to be successful, you got to start talking to people because you really got to dig into the research. Is this viable? Is it just me that loves this? Or do you think other people are going to love this? And then just dig in and go on that journey and be on that ride and realize it's hard. And there are moments you're just going to kick yourself and wonder why you did it in the first place. And then you have the joyous moments that keep you going.
One question I also want to ask, going back to the actual creation of these, and if you're someone like Karen, who I think, or Seeking Center, that will end up building and creating one, how long does it take typically from the time that someone reaches out to you?
Yeah, no, it's also a question we get a lot, which is really an important question. Because we're able to build them in a factory, so it's weather controlled and quality controlled, we say that it's about 8 to 12 weeks. So from when you come to me and we do your plans, we will build that out in 8 to 12 weeks and it should be on your property. So
that's amazing. That's incredible.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's a big difference. You have to remember, I'm using a structure that's already in place. I'm starting with something that I'm taking off the shipyard, and that whole structure is the house piece. And then I'm just building out the inside of that house piece. And so we start with something that's already been started for us.
Obviously, Karen and I talk every day, and she just went through this whole process of building a home. And
oh, Karen, had I known.
and knowing now also because of COVID and all these other reasons, how much things have gone up in terms of building a home in the more typical way. And so when you think about the cost and the time, like things for Karen end up taking much longer. That's when my mouth dropped when Rory said 8 to 12 weeks. I'm like, what?
10% cheaper. I don't want to tell you that now, Karen, because materials have gone up tremendously. And shipping container costs have also gone up, but not as much. And so we don't have as much lumber and we don't have as much of some of the other pieces. People think they're dirt cheap. It's not. I typically say it's usually about 10% cheaper than an average stick built house.
Yeah. No, we can't look backward.
No.
Your place is beautiful.
Your home. You love it.
I will say, I have been talking about this idea of this she shed and what would that look like and how would we go about doing that. And I have to say too, that is a huge thing down in Texas right now because there's a lot of land here and a lot of people like us want a pool because it's so hot. And so
there's shipping container pools.
There are?
Yes. And spas. Isn't that crazy? We don't typically do them because in my opinion, that's a niche area that has a different type of skill set. But you go to, I'll even talk about a competitor, you go to Mod Pools and that's what they specialize in, is doing shipping container pools.
Wow. I really do genuinely see. And as you had mentioned earlier, the weather down here is so unpredictable. So things like that, even my mother keeps saying, Karen, where are you going to go if there's a tornado? We don't
We're going to go to the she shed that we're going to
now I have an answer. Really, I think there's just so many cool and wonderful advantages for everyone to at least look into this because just going to your website is inspiring and seeing what you've done.
I should make mention, company is called SI Container Builds, but the SI stands for Sustainable Imprints. Originally, that was what our company was called. It was just Sustainable Imprints until we realized that nobody knew what that was. And we had to add in the container piece, but I kept the SI because that is really where our core is around sustainability. That was important to us too.
I'm really glad you said that. I was going to ask what SI meant. That makes so much sense.
And the word imprint is so inspiring in its sense too. You are leaving an imprint on the planet, on people's lives. It's a great name for what you're doing.
And have you, just because you're in this industry, have you seen this growing globally?
Absolutely. If you go and you just search like on Pinterest, container homes, you are going to see structures that are going to blow you away. Architects have just been superior in their design of these, and all of Australia, Europe, all other places have been doing this for a very long time. And we're just starting to build those bridges around it. And now it's been able to use the concept in, like we were talking about, other ways for this workplace village or for the she pods that are down at Alabama State now. There's other ways to do it. We're just getting more creative because what are you going to do with 23 million containers that are sitting around? It's not going to change. We're getting stuff every day that is not changing.
And do you find that there are certain states that you see them more in certain places than others?
Absolutely. I think California a year and a half ago passed a statewide zoning for the ability to put what's called an ADU in your backyard, which is what we're talking about, the accessory dwelling units. And it was because of all the fires and the destruction of people's dwellings that they basically said, you're going to be allowed to put this in your backyard. You can live in it until you rebuild your home, and then you can use it to rent out again. And so those types of things are there. California is very progressive. I got to say, Texas is very progressive for containers. Florida, now we're really trying to show, like, if you want something that's hurricane proof, we've got you covered. So there are areas, being in Chicago and being in a port town, it's easy to take the containers right off of the shipyards. So that tends to be why they might be more popular in certain states. Even though they transport really nicely, it's
That's
just
really
easy.
helpful. Yeah. Well, I think there's going to be a lot of people listening today that have never heard about them, to be honest.
We're the only ones in Illinois that do a full turnkey shipping container build. There are people who do fabrication, just fabrication, but we are the only ones to do that. And it's been nice to really break into your own community.
Yeah. Rory, I know for me, just seeing you go through this from the beginning, it's been a privilege. And I know we're on this adventure together. So we're seeking together with
We're
Karen.
seeking. Oh, I feel that way every single day. I feel so blessed when you meet somebody that you have a relationship with, and it doesn't matter how much time goes by. When you connect, it's just, that's a real feeling. And I get to meet Karen now, who's your other half here.
Yes,
that
she is.
started this.
I always feel that, I always have the advantage of meeting Robin's extended family, and then they become my kindred right after.
Good people find each other. That's what it is. If I could only do a referral for friendship from the people I love, that's how the friends will be for me.
But to your point, it's all about the networking and the talking to people. One person leads to another. So that's what this life's about.
You can't be afraid. Even if you're shy or you're more of an introvert, then use the internet to talk with people. Ask questions. This is, I guess, where you come in about this, the seeking piece. The only way to be successful is to learn from other people, because most likely someone has done it before and has some experience. And you're not supposed to know it all. You're just not, ever. And that would be my
truth. Everyone listening, you can find out more about working with Rory and Container Homes and Working Spaces at sicontainerbuilds.com. You can also check them out on Instagram at sicontainerbuilds. And we know we're going to be in touch. I have a feeling that
I love it.
you started something here today.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Appreciate you.
I appreciate you too. Thank you.
Take care.